My older sister forged my name on a power of attorney while I was under general anesthesia and transferred $47,000 out of my father's estate account, the one I was legally appointed to manage. My mother called it a miscommunication. I called Dad's attorney. She had no idea that account wasn't the only one. I'd been in the hospital for 6 hours when it happened. A routine appendectomy, the surgeon said. Nothing to worry about. I remember the anesthesiologist counting backward from 10, and I remember thinking, for just a split second, that I should have moved that folder. The one in my desk drawer, the one with the estate documents, the account numbers, and the notary seal I kept for emergencies. I came out of surgery at 2014 in the afternoon. My mother was there, which surprised me. She lives 40 minutes away and she doesn't drive on the highway anymore, which means someone brought her. I didn't think much of it then. I was groggy and nauseated and grateful for the warm blanket a nurse had tucked around my feet. It wasn't until the next morning, when I turned my phone back on and watched 17 notifications load in sequence, that I understood. 11 were from my bank. 6 were from my father's estate account. The secondary one, the holding account I'd set up to manage his medical debt settlements while probate cleared. The alerts read like a receipt for someone's fantasy life. A wire transfer of $12,000, then $9,500, then $8,900, then $8,600, then smaller ones, rapid and frantic, like someone filling a shopping cart before the store closed, $47,000, gone between 11 a.m. and 1:30 p.m. while I was unconscious on a table. I knew before I even made a single phone call. I knew the way you know when you've been walking through your own house in the dark for years. You don't need the lights on to know what's there. My older sister Vivienne had been circling that money since the day our father's will was read. She just hadn't found the right window until I gave her one. I pressed my call button and asked the nurse for a cup of coffee. Then I sat up in that hospital bed, my incision pulling with every breath, and I called my father's estate attorney. His name is Mr. Calloway. He'd known my father for over 30 years, since before I was born, since my father was a young man building his small chain of dry cleaning shops from a single storefront in Cincinnati. He picked up on the second ring. "Miss Waverly," he said, before I'd gotten more than 3 words out. "I was expecting your call. My father, Roy Waverly, died 14 months before any of this happened. He was 68 years old, methodical, quietly funny, and the kind of man who kept a laminated card in his wallet with his blood type and attorney's phone number on it. He didn't trust banks entirely, didn't trust the government much more, but he trusted documents. He trusted the written word. He used to say, a handshake is a promise, a signature is a fact. He had a notary stamp on his desk for 20 years that he used more often than his stapler. When he got his diagnosis, early onset Parkinson's that progressed faster than any of us expected, he didn't cry. He called Mr. Calloway and spent 3 weeks getting his affairs in order. Then he told us over Sunday dinner, calm as a man discussing the weather. My sister Vivienne took it badly. She always took things badly that she couldn't charm her way out of. She was 41 to my 32, beautiful in a way she'd always treated like currency, and she had spent her entire adult life in a comfortable orbit of people who gave her things. 2 ex-husbands, a rotating cast of benefactors, and our father, who had loved her helplessly and foolishly in the specific way that parents sometimes love the child who needs them most. He left her $20,000 outright. He left me as executor of the estate. I can still see her face at the will reading. Mr. Carre, Calloway's voice reading the provisions, calm and even, while Vivienne sat in the leather chair across from me with a smile frozen on her face like a mask that had dried wrong. She had expected more. She had expected, I think, that our father's death would finally solve her financial life the way she'd always believed it would. She didn't say anything that day. But 2 weeks later, she started calling. "It's just sitting there, Waverly. He would have wanted me to have it. You're so rigid about everything. You always have been. You think following the rules makes you better than everyone. You know he always felt guilty about how much he worked when we were kids. That money is his way of making it right. You're not honoring his wishes. You're just hoarding them. I kept records of every conversation. I'd developed that habit years earlier when I was working as a paralegal and learned that memory is subjective, but timestamps are not. Every text, every voicemail. I had a folder on my laptop labeled simply V, and it had been growing for over a year. The estate had 2 accounts. The first was the primary probate account, handled directly by Mr. Calloway under court supervision, untouchable without judicial approval. The second was a smaller operational account I'd personally set up to process my father's outstanding medical bills, the final insurance claims, and the vendor payments for the dry cleaning shops during the transition period before their sale. It was a working account, functional, document, and it was in my name, with me as the sole authorized signatory. There was, however, a power of attorney document in my father's files, an older one, drafted years before his death for a different purpose, naming both Vivienne and me as co-agents in the event of his incapacitation. It had technically lapsed, but it existed. It had my signature on it, and it had a notary seal. I found out later, from the bank's fraud investigator, that Vivienne had walked in with a copy of that document, told the branch manager I was in emergency surgery and incapacitated, and presented what appeared to be a current valid PO authorizing her to act on my behalf. The branch manager, a new hire as it turned out, had processed the transfers. My mother knew. She had to have known. Someone had driven her to my hospital room. Someone had made sure she was there, visible and weeping and sympathetic, while $47,000 moved out of an account in my name. I called her from the hospital that afternoon. She answered on the first ring, which told me she'd been waiting. "Sweetheart, how are you feeling? Are you in pain?" "Mom," I said, "I need you to tell me where Vivienne is." A pause, just a half second. "But I've known my mother's pauses my whole life. That one was the wrong kind. I'm sure she's at home, honey. Why don't you rest? You just had surgery." This isn't the time to... $47,000 left the estate account today while I was in the OR. A POA document was used that Vivienne provided. "I need you to tell me if you knew about this." Silence. Then, gently, the way she always softened things that didn't deserve softening. "She said you'd been so stressed. She said you needed help. She was just trying to take something off your plate. You know she means well. You know she just..." I hung up. Mr. Broth. Calloway had already been on the phone with the bank's legal team by the time I called him. He was efficient in the specific way that people become efficient when they've spent decades watching families tear themselves apart over money. He didn't express surprise. He didn't express much of anything except a quiet, steely focus. "The POA document she used was invalid," he said. "It expired on your father's date of death, which is standard. It was never intended to authorize transactions on your personal accounts in any capacity. The bank made an error. We'll be filing a fraud complaint with the Ohio AG's office. Is there anything she can do to stop it?" "Miss Waverly," he said, and I heard something in his voice. Not quite warmth, but something close to it. "Your father spent considerable time and care setting up the structure of this estate, the accounts, the documentation, the chain of authorization. He did it precisely because he knew this was possible." A pause. "He mentioned Vivienne specifically, more than once." I closed my eyes. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and the faint ghost of someone's cafeteria food. Outside my window, it was raining. "What do?" I asked. "You rest," he said. "I'll handle the filing. I've already requested a full freeze on any accounts she may have accessed. Given the fraudulent POA, this is straightforward criminally and civilly. The question will be whether you want to pursue charges." "I don't know yet." "That's fine," he said. "You have time, get some sleep." I didn't sleep. I lay in that hospital bed and thought about my father. I thought about the way he used to sit at his kitchen table on Sunday mornings with his coffee and his notepad, making lists. Lists of bills, lists of tasks, lists of things to remember. He was a man who did not trust the future to take care of itself. He prepared for it the way other people prepared for weather, carefully, without drama, and always a little further ahead than anyone thought necessary. He had known about Vivienne. Not in a dramatic way. He never said her name like it was a verdict. But he had seen her, clearly and without the softening lens my mother always applied to her. He had seen the entitlement that my mother had been carefully cultivating in her since childhood, the belief that charm was a skill set and consequences were for other people. He had seen me too. The way he saw me was quieter. He trusted me with things. The key to his office. His insurance files. His attorney's direct number. He never said it out loud. He wasn't that kind of man. But the trust was there, embedded in every practical gesture. When he'd called me to his house 8 months before he died and told me he wanted to talk about the estate, I'd sat at that same kitchen table and taken notes while he talked. He went through everything. The accounts, the documents, the business sale, the timeline. At the end, he pushed a piece of paper across the table to me. It was a single typed paragraph, signed and notarized, naming me sole executor with no co-trustee, no oversight committee, and no shared authority. Vivienne will be upset, I'd said. Vivienne is always upset, he said. That's not your problem to manage. That was the most direct he ever got about it. I was discharged from the hospital 31 hours after I was admitted. I went home, changed out of the clothes I'd worn in, made a pot of coffee I'd barely tasted, and opened my laptop. I had a system. I'd had it for years. The paralegal habit that never left me. I had folders. I had records. I had every text Vivienne had sent me over 14 months asking for access to estate funds. Every voicemail she'd left with my mother playing soft music in the background like a scene being staged. I printed everything. I organized it by date, cross-referenced it with account activity logs, and put it all in a binder that I labeled with my father's case number. Then I went to the bank in person. The branch manager who had processed the transfers was off that day. I met instead with the fraud investigation officer, a woman named Patricia, who had the particular kind of tiredness that comes from watching people do terrible things to each other for years and still having to explain it calmly. She walked me through the timeline. She confirmed that Vivienne had presented herself in person, had the document, had a story about my emergency surgery, and had been convincing enough that no one had thought to call me directly. We should have called the account holder, Patricia said. That's our failure. We're taking responsibility for that. I know, I said, but I need everything documented for the AG filing. She looked at me, just for a moment, with something like relief. You're the executor. I am, I said. Your father set this account up himself, she said. About 2 years ago. He came in with his attorney. He was very specific about the authorization chain. She paused, like she was deciding whether to say the next part. He asked us to flag any POA requests and verify directly with you. He left a note on the account. I sat very still. He left a note? It wasn't legally binding the way a document is, but our branch protocol allows account holders to leave internal instructions. His said, she pulled up her screen, in the event of any POA presented on this account other than by Jennifer Waverly in person, call Jennifer Waverly directly before processing anything. Do not accept third-party representations. My father had known. He had come into a bank branch 2 years before his death and left a note, just in case. The new branch manager hadn't seen it. Vivienne had caught a gap, a single, small, human gap in a system my father had spent years reinforcing. But the note existed. It was time-stamped. It was evidence of premeditated protection. And it meant that when Mr. Calloway's fraud filing went in, it went in with documentation showing that not only was the POA invalid, but the bank had explicit written instructions to prevent exactly what had happened. The next 10 days were quiet. My phone rang constantly, but I had Vivienne's number silenced. My mother called twice. I let them go to voicemail. The messages were variations on a theme I'd heard my entire life. She didn't mean it. She was desperate. She has always struggled. You have so much, and she has so little. Family is everything. Your father would want you to forgive her. My father, I thought, would want me to finish what he started. The meeting at Mr. Calloway's office happened on a Tuesday. I wore the same blazer I'd worn to the estate reading. Dark charcoal, the one my father had once told me made me look formidable, which from him was the highest possible compliment. I brought my binder. I brought a second copy of everything from Mr. Calloway's files. Vivienne was already there when I arrived, sitting in the chair closest to the door in a way that seemed designed for a quick exit. She was dressed carefully, a soft blouse, low heels, the kind of outfit that read as non-threatening. Our mother was not there. Vivienne had come alone, which surprised me and then didn't. She smiled when I walked in. It was the same smile she'd been using on people since she was 8 years old, the one that said everything was fine and could be laughed off over lunch. "Hey Jen, how's the incision?" I sat down directly across from her and placed my binder on the table. Mr. Calloway entered, set his files beside mine without ceremony, and sat at the head of the table. He was 71 years old, white-haired, and had the particular gravity of someone who has watched so many crises unfold that he no longer found them surprising. He looked at Vivienne over his glasses. "You understand why you're here," he said. "I understand there's been a misunderstanding," she said smoothly. "I was trying to help. Waverly was in surgery. I didn't want the accounts to lapse or for bills to be missed while she was incapacitated. I had documentation. I was authorized. The power of attorney document you presented expired 14 months ago on your father's date of death," Mr. Calloway said. "It was never authorized for use on accounts held in your sister's name. You were not authorized. You knew you were not authorized." He said it without inflection, like he was reading a grocery list. Vivienne's smile thinned. "I was trying to help my family." "You transferred $47,000 in under 3 hours, I said. "Where is it?" She looked at me. The smile was gone now, replaced by something I recognized. The expression she got when the charm wasn't working and she needed a new angle. "I was holding it for safekeeping." "Well, you were—" "Where is it?" I repeated. "I can return it. That's what I'm saying. This doesn't have to be a legal situation. We're family." Mr. Calloway opened his folder. "A criminal complaint has already been filed with the Ohio AG's office for wire fraud and misuse of a power of attorney document. A civil complaint has been filed to recover the transferred funds plus damages. The bank has accepted partial liability and is cooperating fully with investigators." He paused. "These filings cannot be reversed by the return of the funds. The money was never yours to hold." Vivienne's face did something complicated. I watched it happen. The processing, the recalculation, the specific moment when a person realizes the ground has already shifted under them and the argument they prepared is for a different conversation than the one they're in. "You do this to your own sister," she said. Her voice had changed. The smoothness was gone. "You'd put your own sister in legal jeopardy. You'd let them arrest me." "I didn't put you anywhere," I said. "You walked into a bank with a fraudulent document and transferred money that wasn't yours." "I needed it," she said, and her voice cracked. "Not a performance this time, something rawer underneath. Waverly, you have no idea. My car payment, my rent, I've been drowning for months. I thought maybe just this once, just until I could get stable. He would have wanted me to be okay. He would have wanted me to be okay. He would have wanted you to have $20,000, I said quietly. He left it to you. He thought about it. He made a decision. That was his decision for you." I opened my binder to the first tab. "He made a different decision for the rest of it." I slid the page across the table. It was the executor designation. Her name wasn't on it. Just mine. "He knew," I said, not unkindly. "He knew what might happen. That's why he built it this way. He loved you, Vivienne, but he didn't trust you with this. That wasn't cruelty, it was clarity." She stared at the document. Her eyes went glassy. The real estate agent's composure, the careful presentation, all of it was gone. What was left was just a woman in her 40s sitting across from a document that confirmed something she probably always half known and never wanted to look at directly. "The funds will be recovered through the civil complaint," Mr. Calloway said gently. "If you cooperate fully, that cooperation will be noted in the criminal proceeding. I would suggest you retain counsel." She didn't say anything else. She sat for another few minutes, staring at the table. Then she picked up her bag, stood up, and walked to the door. She stopped with her hand on the frame. "He always liked you better," she said. She wasn't angry. She just sounded tired. "He always did." "He trusted me differently," I said. "That's not the same thing." She left. The siege that followed lasted about 3 weeks and came primarily from my mother, who did not accept the legal reality of the situation the way Vivienne ultimately had. She called me every day for the first 10 days. She showed up at my apartment once. I saw her through the peephole, stood in my kitchen until she stopped ringing the bell and left. The voicemails were the usual progression: bargaining, guilt, anger, back to guilt. You're destroying this family, Waverly. She made a mistake. She's your sister. Your father would be devastated. He would never have wanted this. I don't know who you've become. You used to be kind. What happened to you? What happened to me, I thought, was that I watched a woman who once hid my father's medical bills from me so she could take him on a cruise with money he didn't have. Lecture me about family. What happened to me was 32 years of being the responsible one, the steady one, the one who cleaned up the messes and kept the records and got called rigid for it. What happened to me was my father, dying, pulling me aside and saying, with his characteristic quiet, "You're the one who'll make sure it actually happens the way I want." I know that. The civil case settled 8 months later. Vivienne returned the full amount plus legal fees. She didn't apologize in any form I recognized as genuine. She sent a text after everything was final that said simply, "I hope you're satisfied." I didn't reply. I moved her contact to my archived folder, the same way I archived everything else that needed to be stored but not accessed. The criminal charge was reduced to her attorney's negotiation to a misdemeanor. She received 18 months of probation and a fine. No prison time. I hadn't pushed for prison time. I had pushed for accountability, which is a different thing, and I'd gotten it. My mother called me the night the sentencing was announced. I picked up, which surprised me and I think surprised her too. "Are you happy now?" she asked. "I'm not happy about any of it," I said. "I haven't been happy about any of it since before Dad died." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "She's struggling. She lost her apartment." "I know," I said. "You could have, Mom," I said gently. "I executed his will. Exactly as he wrote it. That's what he asked me to do. That's what I did. Everything else, all of it, she did herself. You helped her do it. Everything else, all of it, she did herself. You helped her do it. And I can't fix that for either of you." She didn't respond. We stayed on the line in silence for a moment, the way people do when there's nothing left to argue but neither one is ready to hang up. "I love you," I said. "I'll call you on Sunday." I hung up. About 2 months after the settlement, I received a letter from Mr. Calloway's office. Not an email, a letter on his firm's stationery, sealed with actual wax. He'd sent it certified mail, which was very much his style. Inside was a photocopy of a handwritten note in my father's handwriting, dated about 6 months before his death. "For Waverly, if it goes the way I think it might, and if you're reading this, it did. You did exactly right. I know it wasn't easy. None of the right things are. The dry cleaning shops got built one shirt at a time and this estate got protected the same way, detail by detail. I'm proud of you. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Love, Dad." Mr. Calloway had added a single line in his own handwriting at the bottom. He asked me to send this when it was over. It's over. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time after that. The same table where I'd grown up doing homework while my father worked late. The one I'd brought to my apartment when he died because I couldn't stand the thought of it going to an estate sale. I sat there with the letter in my hands and the coffee going cold and the particular quiet of an apartment that is entirely and finally your own. My father had known. He had seen all of it coming. The desperation, the document, the window my surgery would create. And he had done what he always did. He had prepared. He had left a note at the bank. He had written me a letter. He had built his estate the way he built his business, one careful layer at a time, until it was solid enough to withstand the people who would try to pull it apart from the inside. He hadn't left me money. He'd left me something harder to take and more durable to keep. He'd left me his trust, his actual trust, not a legal instrument but the real thing. The belief, documented and deliberate, that I would do what needed doing even when it cost me something. It had cost me something. A sister who might never speak to me again. A mother who would be cordial on Sundays and wounded the rest of the week. The comfortable family myth that we were all, basically fine. But I thought about what Mr. Calloway had said to me once, in passing, about my father. He was the kind of man who didn't mistake peace for comfort. He thought real peace was harder to get and worth more when you had it. I thought I understood that now. In a way I hadn't before. I folded the letter carefully and put it in the folder marked with my father's name. Then I washed my coffee cup, put it back in the cabinet, and went to bed. For the first time in over a year, I slept through the night. I've thought a lot about what my father actually gave me. Not the executor title, not the responsibility of managing his accounts or sitting across from his attorney in a wood-paneled office. Those were just the mechanics of it. What he actually gave me was something harder to name, a kind of proof that the way I had always moved through the world, carefully with records and folders, and the belief that the written word matters, was not a flaw. It was the point. I spent most of my life being told, in one way or another, that I was too rigid, too serious. Vivienne used to say I had no spontaneity. My mother would call me her little accountant when I was 10 years old and refused to let her borrow money from my birthday envelope without writing it down. What they meant when they said those things was that I was inconvenient, that I made it harder to operate in the comfortable gray space where promises don't have to be kept and consequences belong to someone else. What I understand now is that the people who called me rigid were the same people who needed me to be soft. There's a difference between being hard-hearted and being clear-eyed, and I spent too many years letting someone else blur that line for me. Vivienne didn't forge my name because she was a bad person in some simple categorical way. She did it because she had spent 41 years being taught that need was justification. That wanting something badly enough, suffering visibly enough, made the rules negotiable. My mother built that belief in her the way you build anything. Slowly, consistently, one small exception at a time, until the exception became the foundation. When Vivienne walked into that bank with a fraudulent document, she wasn't just desperate. She was executing a logic that had always worked before. She had always found a way to make the consequences land somewhere else. On me, usually. What stopped it wasn't my anger. It wasn't even the legal system exactly. It was my father's patience. It was the fact that a man who knew he was running out of time still thought it was worth driving to a bank branch and leaving a handwritten note on an account, just in case. He didn't do that out of suspicion. He did it because he understood that integrity isn't a feeling. It's a practice. It requires showing up for it even when nothing is happening, especially then, because that's when the structure gets built. I think about that a lot now. The note. The way he came prepared not because he was certain it would happen, but because he took the possibility seriously. That's the thing about real care. It doesn't wait for the emergency to decide what it values. It decides ahead of time in the quiet, and then it holds. I'm not the same person I was before that surgery. Something settled in me through all of it, the hospital room, the fraud filing, the meeting, the letter. I stopped apologizing for the way I moved through the world. I stopped treating my own carefulness as something to be embarrassed about in front of people who found it inconvenient. My father built his business one shirt at a time, and he built his estate the same way. I think the life I'm building now works the same way too. Not dramatic, not fast, just documented, deliberate, and mine.